So 3 years ago, I discovered a new passion that would change my life, trail running. And I think it's fair to say that a lot went wrong on that first race. So the story is, my girlfriend at the time had just broken up with me 3 months before. I was broken into pieces, very miserable, and I coped with the situation by drinking a lot of whiskey and smoking a lot of weed. Trying to raise my spirits, a friend of mine signed me up for a trail running event in the Austrian Alps, the Adidas Infinite Trails. It's a relay race that you do in teams of 3, where each member has to complete a different course. And when one runner gets back to the village, his or her teammate can have a go. So I did the shortest loop of the 3 because I wasn't a runner at the time. I had never ran any race of any kind before, let alone at altitude in the mountains. So my loop was a 25-kilometer trail with 2,000 meters of elevation. So yeah, I was quite nervous and I pretty much spent all my free time training. But I trained at the gym because that's the way I always trained. So yeah, I got jacked. I did lots of squats, deadlifts, CrossFit, preparing for the elevation, and did a lot of RPM spinning classes, trying to prepare myself for the cardio part of that event. So the day comes and my friends and I sit in the car driving to that event. And the day before the race was a welcome run. It was a 15-kilometer run with 700 meters of elevation, kind of a celebration of the whole event, welcoming the runners and the athletes. I remember being in the lineup and thinking I must be the fittest person in the field because everybody else was just so skinny. So the gun goes off. Of course, I run up the mountain. Everybody else is kind of power hiking it up. I try to run up the mountain. At the summit, there was an aid station where this picture was taken. And my legs at that point were jelly. And not far later, my calves and my hamstrings started to cramp up. I stumbled over roots and rocks, fell, I had a bloody knee, and really barely made it to the finish line as the last person of the group that I was running with. And that was only the welcome run. Everybody else was smiling, having a good time, and I was completely exhausted, wobbling back to my Airbnb, really humbled and scared about how I was going to attempt the race the next morning. So the first lesson was to always respect the mountain and leave your ego at home. So as you might have seen in the previous picture, I showed up with a fake Dwayne Wade jersey, my dad's old running shoes that I used for gardening, and I had parachute boxer shorts on. Now on top of that, I did not have all the mandatory gear that was necessary to participate, like a survival blanket or a whistle. So not only was I exhausted and scared about that race, but I had to run around this Austrian city trying to find the necessary equipment to even participate in the race, which didn't make the experience nicer. My friend, the guy who signed me up, saved my ass again, and he got me some running poles, some trail running shoes, a survival blanket and a whistle. But all the stress that day was not necessary. And so the second lesson is, make sure you have the right gear for that trail race. The weather and the mountains can be unpredictable, and trail running is really not a walk in the park. But having the right gear is actually not enough. And that's what I found out the next morning. So running with poles did not come naturally to me. And I think in the end, I would have been quicker if I didn't have brought them along. So I want to complement that lesson by saying, have the right equipment and make sure you know how to use it. And the same, of course, is true for your trail running shoes. As I had new shoes on that I had never worn before, you can imagine that I had the worst blisters of my life after that race. Make sure you have trail running shoes and make sure you test them on similar trails before the actual race. Very important. Do never wear new shoes on a race. Obvious, but I'm sure I'm not alone making this mistake. So now that I was finally running up that mountain, the sun was not up yet, and I had the sound of heavy breaths of other runners around me. As I was approaching the summit, the sun was coming up, and it was a magical moment up there in the mountains. And that's where I think it clicked for me, and that's where a new passion for me was born. But then reality hit, and 10 minutes later, I started cramping up again. And that's when I did the worst mistake of that day. I drank water. My basketball coach always told me if you have cramps, you have to hydrate. So for me, that was obvious. Okay, I need to drink water. I have cramps. But in fact, drinking water in that situation made my cramps worse. My legs were just pumping with cramps. It hurt like hell. And one of the volunteers knew exactly what was going on and gave me salt tabs. I didn't know it at the time, but when you sweat, you don't just lose water. You lose a lot of sodium and other electrolytes, minerals like magnesium, potassium, calcium, natrium, and other like trace minerals. And it's super important for the function of your muscle, especially, to replace water along with those minerals. So it took a while, but after 20-30 minutes, it got better and I could continue running. So that's the third lesson. Bring salt tabs or any kind of electrolyte mix with you on the run. So after the race, I was super relieved. There was an ice bath and I literally could not walk. And waiting for my teammates to finish their course, I just looked back at my training and realized that not one single time did I train on trails. I only went to the gym, maybe ran like on a treadmill for 5 kilometers per week. And it really struck me hard that often we focus on the 20% instead of the 80%, the most important thing. You get good at what you do. CrossFit squats and RPM is all great, but it's complementary only to running. The 80% is the running. And if you're going to participate in a trail running event at altitude, now the best way to train for that is to train at altitude on technical trails. Well, we don't all live in the mountains, but at least go on a hilly course and train your body for the elevation. Because I really put my body under a lot of shock that weekend, and it took me a long time to recover. So lesson number 4 is practice what you'll be doing on race day. Now lastly, as we were driving back home, I was speaking to one of the athletes that was in my team. I asked her how she prepared for these ultra running events because she was into much longer distances. She said that she looked at these events as a celebration of her body and her fitness and was grateful that she was able to move around freely, and that this mentality took a lot of weight off her shoulders preparing for these events. And still today, after lots of trail races and ultras that I did myself, I still think back at what she said and remember to smile when it's tough on the trails. I hope this helped, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.